Hello. In this segment, I am encouraging you to listen to us and each member will have a specific report. In this part, dealing with globalization, I will be introducing a discussion on how people or groups engage with or respond to global economy. Because global economic inequality is such a huge issue, the economy is one of the biggest concerns in the global discussions. The next section will explore three main ways people deal with or push back against the effects of economic globalization. The first one is protectionism. What is protectionism anyway? According to Macalise, protectionism is a policy of systematic government intervention in foreign trade with objective of encouraging domestic production. So, trade exists within nations, pero it is particular of interest here kasi nangyayari ang trade sa buong mundo at an accelerating rate in the era of globalization. Isa pa, free trade has its critics at may mga taong gustong i-restrict ang free trade through barriers like protectionism, according to Mann and Block 2007. Sabi dito, may ilang ways to protect and encourage domestic production including through placing tariffs and quotas on foreign imports. Ano nga ba yung tariffs at quotas? Yung tariffs ay tax on imports which can be either be specific or ad valorem. Yung specific, fixed price siya. Tapos yung ad valorem naman ay may percentage na naka-indicate. Pangalawa ay yung quotas. Ito yung limit on the quantity of a certain good that can be imported. Siya yung parang nagre-restrict. Domestic production can be helped directly through export subsidies and indirectly by such policies as offering tax relief to producers. Tapos, protectionism has existed since the mercantilist era, 1500s to 1800s. And according to Chorev 2007, Industrial Revolution has been practiced by almost every nation. It reached something of a peak following on the set of the Depression in 1929. However, following the end of World War II, nag-shift yung tide ng industry. Tapos, from trade protectionism and toward trade liberalization, according to TAN 2007. At ito yung result ng General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade or GATT 1947 and later the founding of the European Economic Union in 1958. Nagkaroon ng malawakang pagkakaintindihan na hindi epektibo ang protectionism o ang pagprotekta ng lokal na ekonomiya laban sa foreign competition. Pero kahit ganun, patuloy pa rin itong ginagawa ng maraming bansa at sa iba't ibang sektor ng ekonomiya. Kasabay ito kahit hindi magkasundo ng trade liberalization o ang pagbubukas ng ekonomiya sa global trade. Kahit pa sinasabi ng US na isinusulong nila ang free trade, madalas silang inaakusahan na gumagawa rin ng protectionist policies lalo na pagdating sa agrikultura. At sa kabilang banda, inaakusahan naman nila ang ibang bansa, lalo na ang China at Japan na gumagawa ng parehong bagay. Maraming dahilan ang binigay para ipagtanggol ang protectionist policies at ilan dito ay matagal nang naipahayag. Gaya ng sagawa ni Adam Smith noong 1953. Ayon sa kanya, may mga lehitimong dahilan para protektahan ang mga kritikal na industriya, gaya ng defense, magpataw ng buwis sa imported goods, gumante kung may ibang bansa na nagbubuwi sa export mo, at gamitin ang protectionism bilang pansamantalang hakbang papunta sa mas liberal na kalakalan. May iba pang dahilan gaya ng pagtulong sa bagong umuusbong na industriya tulad ng ginawa ng European Union sa Airbus. Pagbibigay proteksyon habang lumalago pa lang ang mga bagong industriya at pangkalahatang suporta sa mga bagong ekonomiya. Kahit may mga ganitong dahilan, dahil sa pag-usbong ng neoliberal economics, bumaba ang suporta at paggamit ng protectionism hanggang sa kamakailan lang. Pero kahit ganon, nananatili pa rin ang ilang anyo ng protectionism at unti-unti itong bumabalik sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo, lalo na sa Global South dahil sa mga negatibong epekto ng global neoliberal economy. So ano nga ba ang importance ng protectionism? While protectionism can benefit local economies in the short term, it may also lead to higher prices, less choice for consumers, and retaliation from other countries through trade wars. So, sa madaling salita, yung protectionism daw ay nagbe-benefit sa local economies in the short term. Pero, may chance din daw na magtaas yung prices ng mga products and malesen yung choice ng consumers sa mga products na yon na ng mga local economies ng mga stores, ganyan. Further explanation will be reported by my other member.
Hi, my name is Angela D.G. Garcia and this is the continuation of my groupmates report about protectionism. I will be giving here reasons why nga ba nag-decline ang protectionism. First one is about the free trade. Yung free trade po kasi, hindi po ito nag-o-offer ng competition sa mga industries, which making it inefficient sa long run. At ayun nga po ang hindi gustong mangyari ng government. As agribusiness students, we all know na pag walang competition na nagaganap sa industries, hindi ito maganda for the flow of global economy. Next one is the tariffs from imported goods. Yung mga tariffs po kasi or additional cost sa mga imported raw materials, nagtataas din ito ng cost of production. So pag mas mataas yung cost of production, yung price ng commodities po ay tataas din. At yun yung may-make sa industry na magiging less competitive ito. As we all know, sa mga competition sa market, mas prefer ng customer ang low-cost commodities. Next one is, pag ang industry naman po ay under ng protectionism, they don't have to compete kasi wala silang reason para mag-invent pa or mag-innovate pa ng mas better na product para ma-offer sa market or to help the community to progress. So, it would lead to less innovation. And the last one is, magsasuffer po ang ating agrikultura. Kasi po sa ibang developing countries, nagpo-focus sila sa manufacturing na nakaka-affect negatively para sa farming or agriculture industry po. So, ito po ang mga pressures naman ng protectionism. Nagkakaroon din sila ng pressure. Yung mga developed nation, takot sila sa mga cheap imports ng products internationally kasi they considered it threat sa domestic industry or local industry. Kaya po naging biggest supporter po ng protectionism si Donald Trump at tinaasan po niya yung tariffs, particularly sa mga Chinese products. Bakit? Kasi mas prefer po niya na mas tangkilikin ng mga mamamayan ang mga locally made produced products instead of imported. Alam naman po natin na ang China ay developed country na, especially sa industrial businesses. And example dito sa Philippines, yung e-commerce po natin, mostly ang nag-offer ng low-cost product doon, di ba, is yung mga Chinese din. Yung galing din sila sa Chinese. And on the other hand, yung mga less developed countries, nakakaramdam po sila ng pressure naman sa IMF and World Bank para daw maliberize yung economy nila. Kasi nafe-feel nila na nagko-compete sila sa pababaan ng presyo ng product instead na pa-improvein pa yung buhay nila or pamumuhay nila, di ba? So while it can shield economies from certain negative effects of globalization, it may also lead to trade wars. Yung trade wars po maaaring magdulot ng pagtaas ng presyo ng mga products at paghina ng global trade or pandaigdigang kalakalan. Magbibuild din ito or possible lang naman na magbuild po ito ng tension sa pagitan ng mga bansa, pati na rin ang pag-reduce nito ng global trade flow. So, ayun lamang po ang para sa protectionism. Ang next one naman po is fair trade na i-discuss po ito ng aking fellow na groupmates. Thank you po.
Trade. So, ano nga ba ang fair trade? Fair trade ay palitan ng mga produkto, makinarya, or even the processed foods. At ginagawa ito upang mapunan ang pangailangan ng ibang bansa na wala sila. So, nagkakaroon ng palitan dahil sa ibang bansa ay naroon ang kanilang pangailangan at sa bilang bansa naman nandun rin ang kailangan ng isa't isa. For example, Magellan discovered Spice Island, which is Moluccas in north, and some countries in south are raw materials like minerals, metals, and so on. It increases community development and more sustainable environmental practices, which how fair trade works, and in fair trading partnership based on dialogue, transparency, and respect that seeks greater equity in international trade, which can balance both countries na nag-trade, nag-benefits, walang nulugi, walang nanglamang. Establishing more just prices should not be set by the free market, but by what is just as far as producer and the social and ecological environment in which they live and work are concerned. They should be negotiated openly, transparently, and equally by the producer and those who seek to acquire what they produce, and each side should seek to understand and accommodate the others' need. Dito, mas na-highlight nila ang purpose ng fair trade ay maging fair or balance. Tulad ng establishing more just prices ay concern a connection na nabubuo at yung respect sa dalawang countries na nag-trade ng produkto dahil ang presyo ay hindi nakabatay sa kung ano yung product, hindi sa kung ano ang kakayahan ng country na i-trade sa kanila. Parehas nilang nakuha yung need, nag-benefit and cycle in production. Protecting producers, especially farmers, from dramatic swings in prices for their products. Providing stable work for those especially in the South who are economically disadvantaged. Halimbawa, ang third world countries ay nag-trade ng products sa first world countries. Ngayon, ng mga nasa third world countries ay nag-benefit sa product na meron ang first world, vice versa, which avoids from dramatic swings in prices for their products. Next is protecting workers' rights, including the right unionize. Next is providing works that is safe and is not exploitative of women and children, engaging in environmentally sound practices, and in sustainable production. Next is being sure that which is produced is healthy to consume. And lastly, educating consumers and encouraging them to put pressure on producer to engage in fair trade practices which lead to more moral and equitable global economic system. So, yun ang fair trade.
Let's move on with helping the bottom billion. Let's discuss the complexities of addressing global economic inequality, specifically focusing on the challenges of helping the world's poorest, or the bottom billion, defined by Collier 2007. We often hear about the North-South divide as a way to understand the global economic inequality. Of course, there are challenges facing the bottom billion. The poorest people in the world are often overlooked when focusing on broader North-South economic inequalities. The effectiveness of foreign aid is questionable due to the diminishing returns, bureaucratic inefficiencies, misallocation of funds, potential for fueling civil wars, and failure to address underlying issues like resource scarcity, poor governance, and inadequate infrastructure. Sa madaling salita, madalas na napapabayaan ng mga pinakamahihirap na tao sa mundo sa gitna ng mas malawak na pagtuon sa hindi pagkakapantay-pantay ng ekonomiya sa Hilaga at Timog. Ang bisa ng tulong mula sa ibang bansa ay nananatiling kaduda-duda sa pagbaba ng mga mali at sa kawalang kahusayan ng bureaukrasya, maling paglalaan ng pondo at potensyal na pagpapalala ng mga dimang sibil at ang patuloy na pagkabigo na matugunan ang mga pangunahing sanhi tulad ng kakulangan ng mga mapagkukunan, mahinang pamamahala at hindi. And there are several areas in which things can be done to improve the situation facing the bottom billion in the global age. The first is aid. In 2016, the most generous countries in terms of foreign aid as a percentage of their GDP were Sweden 0.99%, Norway 0.88%, Denmark 0.82%, and the Netherlands 0.80%. Lastly, Belgium 0.50%. Foreign aid can go to a variety of humanitarian functions such as disaster relief, food, and military assistance. For many in the development community, foreign aid has been seen as critical for helping the poorest people in the poorest countries out of poverty. And there are three main ways under the aid, which are financial aid, military intervention, and policy reform. Let's discuss the financial aid or the foreign aid. While some countries provide significant aid, like Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, its effectiveness is debated. According to Collier, aid can be ineffective because of many factors, such as its impact weakens as the amount increases. There are bureaucratic problems. Many goes to the wrong places, like in military. It can also lead to war. It has no effect on the lack of natural resources. It doesn't improve transportation, and it doesn't solve bad governance. And aid can only be effective if accompanied by other measures from wealthy countries, particularly the G8, with greater accountability and focus on the needs of recipient. Ang pagiging epektibo ng tulong pang-international ay pinagtatalunan, kung saan ang ilan ay nagsasabi na ang epekto nito ay humihina habang tumataas ang halaga, habang ang iba naman ay naniniwala na ito ay maaaring maging epektibo kapag pinagsama sa iba pang hakbang tulad ng pagpapabuti ng pamamahala at pagpapaunlad ng infrastruktura kapag nakatuon sa mga pangangailangan ng mga tumanggap at pananagutan. Sumunod naman ang military intervention. Military intervention can help restore peace and prevent coups, but militaries in poor countries often worsen the situation through extortion. In simple terms, bagamat maaaring makatulong ang interbensyong militar sa pananagbalik ng kapayapaan at pagtigil sa mga kudeta, sila pa yung nagpapalala ng sitwasyon sa mga mahihirap. Sila pa yung mga lalong nagpapahirap sa kanila sa bansa. Dahil ang mga militar ay madalas na gumagamit ng mga pangingitil o pangungulekta ng mga pera. Sila yung mga nagpapabayad na nag-lead upang mas humirap pa yung bansa. Sila pa yung nagpapalala ng kawalang tatag at pumipigil sa pag-unlad. Sa halip na magbigay ng seguridad, ang mga militar pa yung mga nagiging sanhi ng karagdagang paghihirap at pagdudusa doon sa lugar na yon or sa bansa na yon, na nagpapalala ng mga problema na dapat nilang matasin. So, instead na masolusyonan nila yung problema, mas napapalala pa nila yun. At susunod naman ang policy reform, removing trade barriers, especially in wealthy countries, through the WTO can help. However, poor countries need temporary protection to become competitive. It is also crucial to ensure that the free trade doesn't lead to exploitation of workers and the environment. Ang paliwanag ay ang pag-alis ng mga hadlang sa kalakalan sa pamamagitan ng WTO ay maaaring magbukas ng mga bagong oportunidad para sa mga umuunlad na bansa. Dahil sa mas malawak na merkado, mas marami silang pagkakataong magbenta ng kanilang mga produkto at serbisyo na magpapalago sa kanilang ekonomiya. Pero, dahil sa hindi pantay na kalagayan, maaaring hindi makapasok sa kompetisyon ang mga mahihirap na bansa. Kailangan nila ng kaunting proteksyon para makahabol at lumakas bago tuluyang mawala ng laban. Dapat din nilang tiyakin na ang pagbubukas ng mga merkado ay hindi nagdudulot ng pang-aabuso sa mga manggagawa at kapaligiran. Importante na magkaroon ng mga patakaran na magpoprotekta sa mga karapatan ng mga manggagawa at magtataguyod ng sustainable development. At ang malayang kalakalan ay dapat patas at pantay para sa lahat at hindi dapat maging dahilan ng pagsasamantala at pagkasira.
Dealing with political globalization, ito yung tumutukoy sa pangkahalatang issue ng political dito man o sa ibang bansa. And yung political globalization din ay habang humihina yung bansa, mas lumalakas yung international organization at mahalaga na malinaw kung paano at kanino sila dapat managot. Dealing with political globalization means addressing global political issue by focusing on accountability and transparency. So, yung accountability, ito yung pananagutan ng political organization sa kanilang mga kinikilos and dapat sila sumunod sa batas and regulations at maaaring managot sa mga naapektuhan nilang tao sa kanilang mga desisyon at ginagawa. And add in po din, minsan, nawawala ang batas para managot ang mga organization or yung political dahil wala nang maayos na pamamalakad ang isang bansa. So, history and information sa mga taong nakalagay sa module. So, si German 2004 or mas kilala bilang Randall German ay isang political scientist na kilala sa larangan ng global political economy. And noong 2004, ang ginawa at sinulat niya ay tumutukoy sa pagbabago ng patakaran mula sa mga bansa na patungo sa malalaking international organization. And si Palumbo 2017 or si Antonino Palumbo ay isang eksperto sa public policy at political theory. So, dito naman tinutukoy niya kung paano mas mahirap ang accountability pag lumalawak ang patakaran ng mga hindi demokratikong organization. So, yun nga, mas mahihirapan na matukoy kung sino talaga yung mananagot sa batas kung mas lumalawak nga at mas nagiging bago yung pamamahala. So, sa transparency, ito yung pagiging open sa mga desisyon at gagawin nila. At sa kaalaman na pag nalaman nila kung ano yung mga desisyon at gagawin nila, is mas masusuri nila kung tama ba yung ginagawa ng mga political o lumalabag na ito sa CPI. Ito ay para malaman ang level ng corrupt sa mga bansa. At itinatag ito noong 1995 ng Transparency International or TI. So, dagdag info lang din sa name sa nakalagay sa module, si Gupta 2012 or mas kilala bilang Akhil Gupta ay isang anthropologist at political analyst. Sinusuri niya ang problema ng transparency at corrupt sa bansa. At noong 2012, binibigyan diin niya na maraming political organization ang lihim ang kinikilos at walang nakakalam kung hindi sila. Lihim nga eh. So, yun nga. So, ang Transparent International or TI ay isang worldwide non-government organization or NGO na sumusukat at lumalaban sa corrupt sa mundo. At itinitag ito noong 1993 ni Peter Eigen, isang dating opisyal sa World Bank dahil nagalit siya sa kawalan ng action sa World Bank sa issue ng corruption. Kaya umalis siya at nagtayo siya ng sariling or nagbuo ng TI upang itaguyod ang transparency. At mayroon na itong halos 100 national chapters ngayon.
Ako si CJ Axel D. Garcia and I'm presenter of Group 5. Ngayong araw, tatalagayin natin ang isang mahalagang issue na may kaugnayan sa epekto ng globalisasyon sa mga lokal na komunidad. Isa sa mga malinaw na halimbawa nito ay ang karanasan ng mga Hmong at Chamorro, dalawang karutubong grupo mula sa Papua, Indonesia. Simula noong 1967 nang pumasok ang Freeport-McMoRan upang magmina ng ginto, tanso, nagsimula rin makaranas ng matitinding pagbabago at surin ang mga katutubo. Una, ang local resistance. Una, naapektuhan ng gustong kanilang pamumuhay dahil dati ang pamumuhay nila ay nakabatay sa agrikultura, pagmimina, pangisda at pangaso. Kaso, nung pumasok yung McMoRan, yung Freeport-McMoRan, unti-unting nawala yun dahil syempre, ang ng Freeport-McMoRan ay magmina ng ginto at tanso. Nasisira ang kanilang kalikasan na dungisan ng mga sagradong lugar dahil sa Freeport-McMoRan. Nawalan sila ng kontrol sa kanilang sariling lupa dahil sa pagpasok ng mga dayuhan. Asahan pa rito matinding paglabag sa karapatang pantao gaya ng sapilitang pagpapalayas, pang-abuso at karahasan. And sabi dito, ang kasunod ay ang naging epekto pa ng hindi naging tahimik ang komunidad. Gumamit sila ng iba't ibang paraan ng pagtutol sa Freeport-McMoRan na yun para matutol yung mga dayuhan sa kanilang pagmimina ng ginto. Ngayon, ang mga nangyari dito sa traditional na ritual gaya ng pagtayo ng tabu sticks ay mga ginamit nila sa pagtutol hanggang sa mga demonstrasyon, dialogo at legal na aksyon sa loob at labas ng bansa. Nakakuha sila ng concession tulad ng trabaho, scholarship at suporta sa lokal na negosyo. Ngunit ang tanong, sapat ba ito? Sa totoo lang, hindi nagiging sapat yung binigay ng mga dayuhan para mapalitan lahat ng nasira. Next topic is the resistance to globalization significant. Kung pag-uusapan natin kung gaano kahalaga ang pagtutol sa globalization, masasabi natin ito ay makabuluhan pero madalas ay hindi pinapansin. Ayon kay De La Dehesa, nasabi ang mga kritiko ng globalization ay mga iilang organisadong grupo lamang. Samantalang ang mga nakakarami na nakikinabang ay nanatiling tahimik dahil dito madalas ay binamarito, binabaliwala ang boses sa mga tulad ng Among-Get Kamoro or yung mga katatubo. Ipinapakita ng kasong ito na kahit may pagtutol mula sa mga lokal na komunidad, napakahirap nitong baguhin ang mga malalaking sistemang pandaigdig. Gayunpaman, hindi nito ibig sabihin na wala ng halaga ang kanilang pakikibaka. Sa halip, dapat itong kilalanin bilang mahalagang hakbang tungo sa mas makatao at makatarungang globalization.
My name is Renz Menard S. Gutierrez, reporting the global rise of populism. First of all, what is populism? Based on my findings, populism is a political ideology where a group of people or leaders seek support from the masses by contrasting the people's virtuous desires with the supposed self-interest of established political, economic, or cultural elites and restore the power back to the people. According to Moffitt, populism is a political style and a performance. It states that the political leader is seen as a performer, the people as the audience, and the nation's crisis as a stage on which populism plays out. New rising populist leaders usually seek to appeal to the people, in contrast to the elite, or the establishment, or the system. They often target specific others, such as immigrants or racial minorities. They suggest the liberal elite or some other entity is a source of societal breakdown, dysfunction, or corruption, or the loss of something valued like jobs, and thus a threat to the very fabric of society. In the populist mindset, it is the people who are aggrieved and taken advantage of, often by the supporters of globalization and the global flows. First of all, why is populism popular? Populism thrives by capitalizing into the strong emotional currents within the population, such as fear, anger, or resentment towards outgroups or perceived threats to national identity, like crisis or continuous displeasure of the ruling party. This can be used by charismatic leaders who skillfully articulate these feelings and offer a sense of collective identity and purpose, often to a nationalist or nativist appeals. This emotional mobilization can be a powerful tool for gaining and maintaining a popular support from the people. Now let's go to the pros and cons. Pros: improving the living conditions of the poor and increases social welfare, healthcare, and security. Example of this are countries like Poland and El Salvador. Second, it can be a cause of mobilization for change. It can galvanize people to demand action on pressing issues. Third, it can be a voice or empowerment by fostering collective identity and beliefs where ordinary voices can matter. Now, let's go to the cons. Con number 1. Populism helps in the rise of far-right ideology or extremist ideology that can divide the people politically. Second, populism demands to control the flow of economic opportunity or other resources away from the other, or to preserve a cultural homogeneity to benefit of the majority groups and at the expense of the minority ones. Third is, like all politicians, populist leaders can also be associated with corruption, even though they claim to be against it. An example of this are some of the populist parties within Germany and France. So, where is populism currently rising? Based on recent news, Populism is continuously rising within Western countries such as Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Sweden, Ireland, and the United States of America. An example of populist leaders are these examples: the re-elected President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, Geert Wilders of the Netherlands, Pierre Poilievre of Canada, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, and lastly, Javier Milei of Argentina.
Social movements have emerged as a significant responses to globalization, extending beyond local resistance or populist leadership to become broad-scale global actions. Yung social movement nga daw ay hindi na lang maliit na mga local protesters, naging malaki na nga raw yung mga ito at naging international movements na nag-a-address sa social issues dahil sa mga negative effects ng globalization. So to further understand our topic, first let's discuss what is social movement. So according to De La Porta, a social movement constitutes a loose network of formal and informal organizations sustained over time, focusing on political change. Unlike political parties, these movements operate at least partially outside the traditional political institution. It also involves networks of groups and activists united by the shared identities and conflictual issues, often employing the unconventional methods of participation. So, ito naman yung dalawang groups na nag-protest against the global economic institution at events. Ito yung G8 meetings and the European Social Forum. Pero yung mga scholars naman ay nag-raise ng questions about the cohesiveness of these diverse groups. At sinagot naman ito ni De La Porta na despite their diversity, these groups do form a global or transnational movement opposing a globalization from above. So para mas-supportahan yung conclusion na to, meron dalawang facts na dapat i-consider. Yung una nga is yung the frequent overlaps among the participants and organization in anti-alter globalization campaigns. Dito nga daw is yung isa na lang yung mga groups or individual na kasali sa anti-globalization campaign. And pangalawa naman is the intensified interaction among these groups over time. Ito naman, dumadalas na yung pagsasama ng mga groups na to kaya nagkakaroon na sila ng mas malakas na pagkasamaan or nagkakaroon na sila ng mas magandang interactions. Thus, De La Porta conclude that the movement for global justice is truly organized form of resistance. These movements are not only social but also global in nature. First, participants identify themselves with the movement critical of globalization, see themselves as global citizens, and express solidarity with the marginalized population, particularly in the global south. So dito, sinusuportahan ng mga anti-globalization participants yung mga poor countries na nakaranas ng mga negative effects ng globalization. Then, pangalawa naman is yung they engage in unconventional action, and such action is increasingly aimed at global targets. Example nga ng unconventional actions na to ay yung large protests at summits at yung online mobilization naman. So yung pangatlo is the development of globalizational structure enabled largely by the internet. Dito naman ginamit nila yung internet para bumuo ng mas malaking organization. Then yung panghuli is yung their definition of the conflict is that it is global in scope. Dito naman, naniniwala sila na yung pinaglalaban nila ay para sa buong mundo at hindi lang para sa bansa nila.
About the movement for global justice and democratization. This is not just one group or organization, it's a mix of movements from all over the world na against sa mga negative effects ng globalization, importantly yung related sa neoliberal capitalism. So what brings all these different groups together under one movement? Kahit iba-iba sila ng beliefs at local issues, they are united into one idea. Laban sila sa klase ng globalization na inuuna ang kita kaysa sa tao. As Rayton said, these groups are not just about resistance. They also want to build better alternatives. They are calling for equality, dignity, democracy, autonomy, sustainable living, and peace and justice. Kahit magkaiba sila ng strategies, They all want a better and fairer world. Next is evolving labels and identity of the movement. At first, tinawag silang anti-globalization movement kasi they were seen as opposing globalization and big corporations. Pero later on, scholars explained na hindi naman sila against sa lahat ng globalization. They just don't want the harmful type of globalization. That's why they started using the term alter globalization, meaning they want a different kind of globalization, human, fair, and inclusive. Some also call it a global peace and justice movement. Dahil di lang ito tungkol sa economy. Some also call it movement of movements kasi sobrang diverse at decentralized yung mga group. So, these names shows na lumawak na talaga yung focus nila. Even gender, environment, at post-colonial issues are included na. Next is women's movements in Muslim. One good example of movements diversity is the women's movements in Muslim majority countries like Egypt, Iran, and Turkey. These movements are not all the same, na may Islamic feminist, may secular, at may iba na ayaw tawaging feminist. Ang focus nila usually includes the development, history of colonialism, resistance against imperialism. Even if their approach is different from Western feminists, they stay connected through social media, UN forums, international feminist networks. These groups, na kahit iba-iba ang context, they still work together through global solidarity. Next is the global case study. The movement shows up in different parts of the world in different ways. In Iran, women played a key role sa Green Movement para sa democracy. Sa Mexico naman, the Zapatistas continue to fight for indigenous autonomy. While in Europe, may mga protest laban sa austerity or budget cut sa public services. Even in China, people organize local protests for workers' rights and environmental concerns. Iba man ang issues, they all believe in justice, democracy, and people power. So, to sum it up, the movement for global justice and democratization is local in action but global in impact. Diverse and flexible but united in purpose. Not just about saying no, it's about creating better opinions. It's a reminder that people from different places and backgrounds can stand together to change the way globalization works and make it more just for everyone.
Movements and the global boomerang. One way in which movements for global justice and democratization bring about changes is through the formation of transnational advocacy networks taking a boomerang pattern stated by the Keck and Sitkin 1998. Describe how local movements build a transnational relationships to promote change within local settings. We have the boomerang pattern and the inverse boomerang. Boomerang pattern is in some countries, especially in the global south, domesticated governments may not respond to citizen needs. NGOs and social movement in these regions may lack access to institutions protecting rights. These groups may bypass their state and seek international allies, often NGOs in the north or INGOs, who then apply pressure on the original state. This process forms the boomerang pattern where advocacy efforts circle back as international pressures. Sa boomerang pattern nga ay yung mga local people ng isang bansa ay humihingi ng tulong internationally or globally para maayos at mas mapaganda nila yung takbo ng kanilang government. On the other hand, inverse boomerang naman is yung global power use the local government to get what they want, sometimes hurting local people. So, dito sa inverse boomerang, yung kabalitaran ng boomerang pattern. Yung mga global or international organizations naman yung gumagamit sa mga local governments para makuha nila yung gusto nila na minsan nga ay mas makakasama pa sa mga local citizens ng isang bansa.
So, what is World Social Forum? It's one of the most important platforms in the global movement for justice and democratization. It's not just an ordinary organization, it's a space where people from around the world come together to share ideas. So, origins and purpose of World Social Forum. The WSF started in 2001 in Porto Alegre, Brazil. It was formed after a major protest like the one in Seattle. Ginawa ito bilang counter-space sa World Economic Forum na tingin ng marami ay masyadong elite at kulang sa democratic values. Its slogan is "Another world is possible." That means people believe we can create a better, fairer world, something different from neoliberalism. So what the WSF offers? Unlike political groups, WSF doesn't focus on making decisions or direct action. It's more of a forum, isang open space para sa discussions like idea sharing and building connections among different movements. Its strength is in global networking. Ang daming taong magkakakilala at nagtutulungan. But the weakness is sometimes it's hard to turn those talks into real action. So the growth and global impact from 5,000 attendees in 2001, the WSF grew fast. Umabot ito sa 100,000 people sa India by 2004. Since then, it's been held in places like Tunisia, Canada, and Brazil. Now, may mga local and regional versions na rin ng WSF sa iba't ibang bansa, showing how wide its impact has become. Cyber activism and networking. The WSF is also connected to cyber activism. Gumagawa ito through horizontal networks, meaning walang formal leader and everyone has an equal voice. It's been linked to big global movements like Occupy, the Arab Spring, and global feminism. That shows how flexible and relevant it is still today. So, in summary, the World Social Forum is a powerful example of global democracy in action. Yes, may challenges siya, like turning ideas into actions, pero it continues to be a space where people fight for a better world together.
Good day. In this part, I'm going to discuss if resistance to globalization is actually significant. Although opposition to globalization can be strong and comes from many different groups, it's often dismissed by supporters of globalization. For them, globalization is seen as something inevitable, something that will continue to expand no matter what. Halimbawa, sa isang worker ng isang factory dito sa Pilipinas, ay nawalan ng trabaho dahil yung operasyon ay inilipat sa ibang bansa. Siya ay tumututol pero hindi siya pinapansin ng mga nasa gobyerno dahil sa paniniwalang bahagi lang ito ng globalisasyon. Economist De La Dehesa offers two reasons why resistance is often ignored. First, the most vocal opponents of globalization are usually those who are most negatively affected by it. These groups may be small in number, but they make the most noise. On the other hand, those who benefit from globalization tend to remain silent. Second, well-organized groups are often the ones who dominate public debates and influence decision makers. Even if they are not the majority, they are the ones with structure and presence. Meanwhile, larger groups that may support globalization but aren't organized are rarely heard. Next, loud minority versus silent majority. This gives the impression that only a few people resist globalization, when in reality there may be a large number of quiet supporters who aren't as visible or organized. Halimbawa, sa Manila kapag may nagrally laban sa globalisasyon, ito ay nababalita at napapansin. Pero ang mga taong naniniwala na mahalaga ang palitan ng produkto at trabaho sa ibang bansa ay nananatiling tahimik.
And the final part of this chapter, what will be the future of globalization? There is only one answer in this question, and that is the future of globalization is uncertain. Because we can simply see what will happen in the upcoming days or years, because the future is unpredictable. All we can do is anticipate and imagine if the future will be good or bad. Even if our understanding in the social sciences are pretty good in analyzing both the past and the present, our prognostications about the future are notoriously weak. We can only assume what would happen, such as if the present rich countries would collapse or still stand, and if the present poor countries would rise or remain stagnant. Another assumption is if the global economy would crash and create another Great Depression, or another major war would break out, the effects of climate change, and other issues that can affect the future of our society. These catastrophes are the general concern, which is why we couldn't foresee the future of globalization. We the people usually base our perception for the future on mediums such as fiction works like Mad Max, where the world is set on a post-apocalyptic setting. The Hunger Games, where a totalitarian regime rules in tyranny. The same goes to George Orwell's novel named 1984. Or perhaps a corporate dystopia setting of Cyberpunk 2077, where right now we could observe in countries like South Korea, Japan, and the People's Republic of China. Globalization would surely spread and continue functioning, shaping and influencing our societies to generate different outcomes, whether it be good or bad. It can have ups and downs, but we can only hope that we could all rise and continue on facing future challenges of globalization.